Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Today is going to be just a little bit of a different type of video, more chatty, more story, maybe a little bit less like cheery and happy, I suppose, but it's part of my story that I've never shared on here. Something big that my family just went through this past week and over the past 10 years that I would like to share with you because it's part of who I am and there is hope. There is hope at the end of this story. This isn't just a sad thing that is meant to fill you with sadness or depression or whatever. This is a part of who I am that has actually made me a better person, and I'm thankful for how it's changed me, and I'm excited that I can share it with you guys as well. So let's just dive in. I will hope to not make this like too long, but maybe grab some laundry to fold, grab something to drink, and let's have some story time. So this story takes place starting the day before I turned 15. Now, I love my birthday. I love celebrating other people, but I also love my birthday so much. Like, anyone who knows me knows that it's something that I look forward to, that I count the days for months and months and months, and I just love that. Well, this particular birthday in 2012 was a little bit different. So the day before my birthday was completely normal for me. I went to bed as normal and I woke up on my birthday. My mom comes in my room, she sings to me, and then she says, "Jay's in the hospital." Now, I have a brother, Ross, who is 9 years older than me, who at this time was in his last year or his last semester of college with his engineering degree. And my brother Jay, who my mom was talking about being in the hospital, is 6 years older than me, and at this time was working, going to school. He worked at the movie theater, like in the box office in our local movie theater, and was going to school at North Central University in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he was going to be, he was going into something with math. Now, this eventually changed, and down the road he changed from wanting to get a degree in math and like be a teacher with math or a professor to becoming a pastor, and that change took place in the following months. But I woke up and my mom said Jay's in the hospital. Now, little did I know, once my brother Ross and I went to bed that evening, and my parents get a call from Jay saying he told his boss he needed to leave work early because he wasn't feeling well. Now, Jay is like the smartest person that I know. Jay was 5th in his class of over 400 kids graduating high school. His GPA was like 4.3 or 4. He almost got like a perfect ACT score. Like, I think he missed it by like 1 point and was like really upset. He was that straight A's, above and beyond, always extra credit, just super intelligent kind of guy. Well, he called my parents saying he was having a hard time making change that evening. All of a sudden, he just had a hard time. He was blanking out. He couldn't make simple math for people buying movie tickets. And so he asked to leave, and he said he went to the parking lot and he couldn't find his car. At this point, this is obviously very alarming to my parents. Like, their 20-year-old is saying that he can't find his car in a small parking lot and he can't make simple change. Like, this isn't like Jay. So my parents, all the while Ross and I are asleep at home, they go to Jay and they find him just wandering the parking lot. And obviously that's like what's going on? They brought him to the hospital, found out that he had blacked out. That's what that whole like episode was it just kind of all of a sudden hit him. He couldn't make simple math. He had a hard time, just like felt kind of foggy and groggy in his mind. He was blacking out at that time. Never actually like fainted, but like it was like his mind fainted per se. So that day I was woken up, found out that Jay was in the hospital. Well, we went and spent the day with him. He felt horrible that my whole birthday was spent in the hospital, but honestly, I don't really remember that day a ton, except for it entailed of a lot of waiting. Jay had a lot of tests done to figure out what happened, why, and over the next following weeks, we found out and a lot happened. Jay was told that he had a brain tumor, and not only that, but that brain tumor was cancerous and had stage 4 brain cancer. And then on top of that, the brain cancer I don't know the correct like surgical term for it or medical term, but it had fingers. So it's not just like a simple mass that you can go in, remove the mass. It was a mass that also had what they call fingers. And so you can't go into a brain and precisely remove little bits that aren't like a solid circular mass. And so I believe over this journey, he had 2 different surgeries in his brain where he had a big scar across his skull, removing that. Well, in the next following weeks, I mean, this was end of September of 2012, moving into October, we find out this news. It obviously changes absolutely everything in our life. I mean, I was a sophomore in high school. Ross was graduating college, going to school every single day. He was still living at home. I was still living at home. I didn't have my license. So all of a sudden, other people are having to pick me up and bring me to school. My dad is an engineer. He's still going to work every day. Thankfully, my mom, as a children's pastor, had the ability to be able to do more work from home because Jay had to start going to Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, which at this time was about an hour-and-a-half drive one way. And my mom took him 5 days a week for like extended months at a time to get treatments of chemotherapy and radiation. So all the while, Jay is still taking like, what is it, like 24 credits in college. The treatments only lasted for like 8 weeks. And then he was still working, he was still going to school, all of these things. Like he literally had to get it approved by the school to take this many credits because they're like, oh, that's not manageable. And he's like, I want to, and I've proved that I can do it. That was Jay's personality. And so it changed a lot in that way that like I'm 15, like I'm all of a sudden like my mom's not home as much, Jay's not home as much. My brother, who I've lived with my entire life, is now losing his hair. Eventually my mom shaved it all off because it was kind of blotchy because they had to like shave the patch with the huge scar where he had surgeries. But overall, like what's crazy is that Jay was still happy. Jay wasn't one of these people who was like, poor me, I have cancer, like life sucks, this is the worst, I'm gonna die. Like those words were not said in our household. The word death, dying, like never occurred because it was not a thought on any of our minds. I think it was a thought on Jay's, but not on our family. Like Jay had come to pass that he, ended up changing his major to be a pastor. And he was like, I'm going to live to tell the testimony of my life. But then he also would say, but if I don't, like if my going through this can impact one person's life positively and I can show the light of Jesus and share my testimony with one person and it affects them, then the whole thing's worth it. And to wrap my mind around the fact, I'm almost 26, that a 20-year-old found out that they have cancer and that they had come to terms with the fact that if they weren't going to be able to live on the earth any longer and that they were going to die, but that it would impact someone's life positively, that they were okay with it. Now, this didn't mean that Jay was like wanting to die. That's by no means the case. But Jay was just filled with peace. And that peace overflowed into my whole family. I never once thought my brother's gonna die. In my head, it was my brother's going through something, but he's going to be healed. My family, we are Christians. My mom, as I mentioned, was at the time a children's pastor. Jay was now going to school to be a pastor. He felt called to open a church in Georgia and be a pastor and preach the gospel. And we believed, we had faith. We knew what the Bible says. We knew that Jesus could instantly heal Jay. We knew it. We believed it. We had times where people from our church would come over and we'd all worship and we'd pray over Jay. We had so much faith. Jay continued to be happy. Jay continued to do all those things that I mentioned and was being himself until one day he couldn't anymore. Don't remember exactly like when the change took place, but so I might have my timeline a little bit messed up. But Jay had a brain bleed And at that point, because he never was staying in the hospital, minus like his brain surgeries and stuff of like removing the tumor and removing that mass, like he wasn't in the hospital, but he did have a brain bleed and had to get rushed to the hospital. And that was a little bit of a turning point negatively for his health. He ended up being in the hospital a little bit, had to drop out of school, had to stop working, or not necessarily drop out, but had to like stop for a semester, you know, had to take a break from school. And that's kind of when he just kind of started to not be doing as well. And at that point is when we started to see some sides of Jay that we hadn't seen in the prior multiple months. Chemotherapy and radiation are great to help with cancer, but there's also side effects to those as well. And with the brain bleed, and the cancer started to spread, and the cancer started to spread down his spine. And I have one specific memory. I was actually babysitting a family friend who was like maybe 10 at this point. And Jay was upstairs and he was laying on the ground in his room on his stomach, and he couldn't walk anymore. And I don't exactly remember why we had to get him to the hospital, but at this point he really he was nauseous. The cancer was spreading down in his body, and when the tumor in his brain has fingers, I mean, you can't fully remove those, and the chemotherapy and the radiation again are helping, but all of that is starting to spread down the rest of his body. And Maple, not the time. Shh. And Jay was a tall guy. He was a big guy. He was over 6 foot, taller than both Ross and my dad, and he couldn't move. And we needed to get him to the hospital as soon as possible. And so we had to call over some family friends that lived like 10-15 minutes away, who were also some bigger, tall guys. My dad and brother Ross like couldn't carry Jay down the stairs. Jay was the kind of person that when he needed procedures and he needed a catheter and all these things, like he would literally thank the doctors and nurses for doing the procedures and putting a catheter, all the like painful things. He would thank the doctors. He had such a good attitude. But this specific time when we had to call our neighbors to come and help carry Jay down the stairs. The family friend that I was babysitting at that time, my mom and I are standing there, and we are watching Ross, my dad, and these two other guys carry a grown, at this point, 21-year-old man down the stairs. And my dad said, he looked at them and said, no matter how much Jay winces, we have to get him to the hospital. And so you have to keep moving. This was the first time that the reality of what Jay was going through and the fact that he wasn't getting better, but that he was actually getting worse, sunk in before my eyes. As a 15-year-old, I'm standing there watching my brother have to be lifted by 4 grown men, and he is screaming in pain. How I felt that moment will never leave me, because like I said, that was the realization that Jay actually isn't improving, that it's been at this point, I don't know, maybe 7 months since he was diagnosed, maybe a little bit longer, and he's not getting better. It's only gotten worse. We still believed, we still were praying, but they got Jay in the car, had to bring him to the hospital, and I don't remember when this was, but this may have been June at this point. He had already had the brain bleed, the cancer kept returning, and he started to not be able to move his legs. And one specific day, I don't know if this was that hospital stay or not, again, I don't have it all, like, the timeline perfect, but June 30th of 2013, my mom is in the hospital with Jay, and Jay had started not talking as much as well. He's laying in the hospital and he keeps looking up to one side. And he specifically said, lights. And my mom was like, what? Like, you see lights? And he's like, lights. And he described to my mom that he saw Jesus in the hospital room. He just kept saying there were a lot of lights around his face. And my mom's trying to pry out details, like, what does he look like? What's he saying? And she specifically said, read his lips. What is he saying to you? And he mouthed to Jay, or Jay said that Jesus said to him, you're going to be healed, or you are healed, or something along those lines. And from that moment, my family was like, Jay is getting healed. Jay's getting healed. We started believing, and like, I mean, we were already believing, but it was like, Jesus told Jay that he's going to be healed. So it's going to happen. Like, we already have faith that it's going to, but like, Jesus said it, like, to Jay. Like, not many people in their lifetime can say, I've seen Jesus, like, he has spoken to me. And so in that moment, I think that gave us like a little bit of like a brighter perspective. And a couple days later, that day or something, Jay was able to come home from the hospital. Now looking back, I fully didn't understand this, but Jay was coming home on hospice care. Now, if you are unfamiliar, hospice care is usually when, you know, you have a hospital bed in your home, there are people there to watch you, and it usually means that you are going to pass away. Now, my family, Jay, like, also full of faith, full of peace, that it was like, you know, this kind of sucks, but also like God is moving and God is going to work in this. That even then, like, I think maybe as a 15-year-old, if I would have known more, it maybe would have been sad. I felt like my mind was sheltered, but like in a way that it was just like, nope, everything's gonna work out. And I think that was for the best. Jay was not able to get up the stairs. He wasn't able to get to his bedroom. He had a hospital bed in our living room. My mom specifically that day, when the nurses and doctors like brought him home on that bed with hospice care, she looked at them and she said, you treat him like he's going to live. Because sometimes, you know, these hospice workers are so used to like coming into a home, taking care of somebody, and then a couple of days, like they know they're gonna die. And when that's your job, is taking care of people who are going to die within a couple of days, like, you might treat them differently than somebody who's, you know, just coming in the hospital and are going to recover and go home. And my mom looked at them and said, you treat him like he's going to live, that he is going to be healed. And we had people coming to visit. We had people coming to bring us food. One of Jay's best friends, her name is Brooke, and he loved her voice. He loved the way that she sang. And he, at one point, it was so sweet, they came to visit and he wanted Brooke to sing. And he told everyone to leave the room. He just wanted Brooke there. And again, Jay wasn't saying like a ton of words at this point, but Brooke sang to him. And again, this was 2013. Jay loved Demi Lovato at the time. You know, she'd just come out the Unbroken album. She was still, you know, more innocent. And Jay loved Demi Lovato, had seen her at concert, brought her flowers, was literally front row at the State Fair the year prior at the concert, like, loved her. And he looks at Brooke and says, you sound better than Demi Lovato. And we're all like, what? Like, we're all like around the corner, like, okay, we're giving Jay and Brooke like their privacy, but also like, what's happening? Like, this is really sweet. And that's one special moment in that time of Jay in hospice. We had I think 3 separate women who went to our church who were nurses, who said that they would take night shifts with Jay so that my parents could sleep. I don't remember exactly, like, was hospice there all the time? Like, they weren't there at night. I don't know exactly what that looked like, or if they were just like on call. I'm not sure. But those nurses stayed up with Jay all night in our living room just to, you know, keep watch, let my parents get sleep. Because at this point, like, being a mom of 2, like, I can't really comprehend what my parents were going through at this point. But like, if my kid like has a fever, like, I'm sitting there like crying with them. Like, I want them to feel better. I don't want them in pain. Like, I can't imagine cancer, and I can't imagine all of that. Seeing your kid not like able to stand in a hospital bed, and you're living room, and these 3 women from our church were amazing, and they let my family sleep so that they could stay up. July 9th, 2013, I think our family friend Rachel was there, and she looked at my parents. It was early morning, and she said, "Wake your kids up." My mom's response was, "Is Jay gonna die?" Because again, even though like anyone from the outside would be like, Jay's not doing well, like he's probably gonna pass away, our family was just so full of faith that it was like, you know, this is what this is what like you want, like your natural eyes will see, but like supernaturally, like Jesus is our healer. Like Jay is gonna live, Jay is gonna be healed. And something I forgot to mention is during this like week that Jay had hospice care at our house, he kept saying, "Let's go home, let's go home." And my family kept reminding him like, "Jay, you are home, like you're in your house, like you're home." He started saying that as soon as after he saw Jesus in his hospital room, June 30th. And this was a week later, week and a half later, in our home. Rachel tells my parents to wake Ross and I. Walking down those stairs that morning to see Jay was the first time death was on my mind. Because Jay ended up passing away that morning. Rachel went to our porch and gave our family space. And my mom, dad, Ross, and I sat there, held Jay's hands, talked to him. He was not responding. But Jay kept saying home. And we realized in that moment that Jay wasn't talking about his home on earth. He was talking about seeing Jesus. And since he saw Jesus's face and he said, "Jay, you're going to be healed," Jesus was meaning that he was going to be healed, but not in the way that we had all thought he would be healed. He was going to be healed in heaven. As soon as Jay saw Jesus, he kept saying, "Home, home, I want to go home." He meant his heavenly home, but in that moment, he was holding on for us. He was holding on for our family. We looked at him in his eyes, we held his hands, and we said, "Jay, go be with Jesus." Around 8 something that morning, as it was gloomy outside and it was rainy, and Jay went to be with Jesus, and Jay passed away. My brother Ross was holding his hand and kept holding his hand for hours. It hit our family like a ton of bricks, because this was July and he blacked out end of September the year prior. So in 9.5 months, Jay was battling this, and we were going through this as a family. And you might be thinking, how is this a story of hope, Tia? Like you said this isn't just doom and gloom, but this seems like a lot of doom and gloom. Well, I want to tell you, that day there was an eagle flying around our house. Our neighbor saw. At Jay's funeral, there was an eagle flying around the church that someone else saw. His funeral was not a doom and gloom. Yes, people were crying. Yes, it was very, very, very sad. But it was a celebration of Jay's life, because so many people, we had an opportunity of passing a microphone around. We heard of so many stories that we had never heard before of Jay impacting people's lives. Of Jay going to people who were maybe outcasts and saying like, "Hey, it's okay, like you're loved, you're accepted here at church." He gave people Bibles, he prayed with people, stories that my family had never heard. Jay's life was a testament of how good God is. Jay was a godly man, full of peace, full of hope, full of joy. He was so joyful and happy. And even though that morning on July 9th, 2013, I lost my brother and one of my best friends, God is still good. Does it still hurt? Of course it does. And I think it always will. But this past week we celebrated and honored Jay. This is a couple days past. We just honored him and celebrated 10 years since he passed away. And I can still say I'm a better person today because of this. This grew my 15-year-old faith in a way that I didn't know it needed growing. But looking back, my parents especially would have had every single reason to fall into depression, to doubt God, to leave the church, to be upset. And don't get me wrong, we were very, very sad, and we so believed Jay would be healed on earth and continue his life. 21 years is so short, and like I mentioned, like I'm almost 26, and like the fact that I've been blessed with 5 extra years that Jay hasn't, like, blows my mind, because it's like I don't want to take my life for granted. And Jay never got to be able to be married. Jay never got to have kids of his own. Jay would be such an amazing uncle to his 3 nieces and nephews he has. The point I want to make is that Jay's story didn't end the way that we would have thought, but God is so good. He has such a plan. He has such a plan, and the amount of people who have come to know Jesus at Jay's funeral. I think there were over 30 people who raised their hand at Jay's funeral accepting Christ. The amount of people who have accepted Christ, the amount of people who have said that their lives have been impacted by Jay's story is incredible. And I miss my brother tremendously. As the years have gone on, it's hit in a different way. Tamara died. I don't know exactly what I was saying, but as I'm married, my husband Trevor is so similar to Jay. So similar. He graduated from the same college with the same degree that Jay was going to school for. They have the same favorite food. They are both incredibly tall. So many things that, looking at my husband, I'm like, Jay and him would have been really good friends. Seeing my kids, my daughter Lainey, one specific lady who used to go to our church has told me over and over, Lainey looks like Jay. And Lainey's middle name is Jay, J-A-E, in honor of her uncle that she will not get to meet on this side of heaven. But I can't emphasize the fact that, like, my family would have had every reason to become angry at God and to doubt him and to think, why? Like, why would this 21-year-old man not live? Why did he have to get cancer? Like, why couldn't somebody who maybe more deserved it in our eyes get cancer? Like, but God has a plan, and we don't fully understand it. But I can stand here today, 10 years later, and say I am more full of faith. I believe in the Lord stronger than I did before Jay passed away. Jay's life is still a testament. My parents live somewhere else now, and they are in their dream retirement home on a lake. And they see eagles all the time, and that is our reminder of Jay. Eagles have been in every significant location of Jay's life and Jay's story. Jay passed away sooner than we thought. A parent, being a parent myself, like, a parent should never have to bury their own child. But we just went to the grave on his 10-year. I was able to see my kids in front of the grave and think, you won't meet Uncle Jay on earth, but guess what? Jay is in heaven. Jay is healed. Jay is more alive than any of us. And he's running around, he is dancing, he is cancer-free, he is happy. And that, like, knowing that we will see him again just, like, brings a smile to my face. If you're going through something, and, like, lean on God. God gives peace that surpasses all understanding. And I love that. Like, there is a worldly peace where it's like, oh, we're all healthy, we're all good, we're all, like, financially good, like, we have peace, like, life is great. And then there's the kind of peace that surpasses understanding, that you can say, you know, this isn't ideal, but I still trust God and I still believe. And that's the kind of peace that the Lord gave my family. And to this day, we cry together, but we also think about all the good memories, and we laugh and we hug each other, and we read old notes that Jay wrote us. He wrote us all, like, a couple months before he passed away. Just one day he was home and he wrote all of us a note. That is all of our last notes we received from Jay. We all read those every couple of years. We cry, we laugh, it's just enjoy memories of Jay together. In a few years, there will surpass the amount of time that I've lived on earth without Jay than with Jay. And that's really crazy to think about, that it's been that long, that like my sister-in-law never got to meet Jay. Trevor never got to meet Jay. He never got to see his nephews and niece. But Jay's not here to be able to tell his story, but I am here to share his story, and that's why I wanted to share with you. This isn't a look at what T has gone through, like that really stinks. Like this is a wow. If someone can sit there and say, this is what I've gone through, this is what my family has gone through, but I still believe that God is good, I want that to give you hope. And I want that to like fill you with an amount of peace that you didn't think was possible. Thank you for tuning in. I know this was a little bit chattier, a little bit longer. I'm sorry that I was just full of tears. I didn't think that I would cry, but God is good. Whatever you are going through, God is good. God can heal and do all of that on earth, but he also sometimes chooses to do it in heaven too. But regardless, he is still good, and you can trust in him. So thank you for watching, and you can tune into the next video where it will most likely be filled with less tears. Thanks for watching. Bye.